The moment has arrived. Nearly 3 years have passed since the start of this saga, and I assure you, there's no turning back. I've conquered impossible distances, fought my favorite of the flock's fascination with the frightful feathers he found, and spent multiple hours in many individual levels of this wretched game, all for one glorious purpose: to complete Angry Birds with the fewest bird powers physically possible. Today, that journey will end as I take on the final 3 episodes of Short Fuse, Surf and Turf, and the Glittering Golden Eggs. Is it possible to complete Angry Birds without bird powers? Nope. No, these are definitely the last ones. My undying faith in humanity leaves me unable to believe that you care enough about Angry Birds to watch Jurassic Pork, of all things, get utterly roasted without bird powers. But if you want to prove me wrong about that, you are welcome to sacrifice your own mental health to bring more powerless solutions to the masses. While I am open to going further on more distinct spin-offs such as Angry Birds 2, Star Wars, or Epic, this may be the last classic content on my channel. The stages here set some brand new difficulty records, and altogether took me nearly twice as long as my hardest Angry Birds videos to date. The 4 levels which bested me in parts 2 and 3 also deserve a revisit for redemption, so let's see if I can't complete this quest on a high note. Prior to properly playing though, I had a few hangups to sort out. The PC version I'd been using up until now doesn't actually include the final 15 Short Fuse stages, or a decent chunk of the golden eggs. Leaving those out would obviously be unacceptable, so I only had one option: play through the entire mobile version in order to reach the extra stages. This sucks, mainly because there are literally hundreds of levels and you need at least 2 stars to unlock each one, requiring much better performance than Powerless would allow. Safe to say I wasn't about to do the entire challenge again just to unlock a few more levels, and I don't need my psyche more permanently damaged by 7-11 and 14-12, just to name 2. I put a solid 3 hours of effort into that ordeal before my Discord server informed me of a mod which ported all the stages to the PC version. So, hooray! I don't need to waste my time on that anymore. While this was definitely the right decision, there are still going to be some mobile shenanigans later on. If you're mad I can't make up my mind or didn't use your preferred version, be sure to let me know by smashing your face into those dislike and unsubscribe buttons, just as my feathered friends fearlessly faceplant their foes. Short Fuse begins with an alteration to everyone's favorite explosive avian. Upgrade isn't strictly the right word here, but after falling into a puddle of generic evil purple video game goop, Bomb has become Shockwave, our final new bird. There are some key differences from his original form which I'll address shortly, but suffice to say that this strong auto-activating ability is plenty for my mutated missile to maintain his top-tier spot. While he is immediately tutorialized, let's skip forward to level 8 where things get interesting in such a way as to perfectly demonstrate this new ability. For the most part, it's pretty standard stuff, except for this extremely inconveniently located hog suspended in the upper right. I can launch just far enough to bonk against the lowest pipes, but Shockwave maintains Bomb's default 1-second delay, meaning he'll fall out of range before he can damage this dastardly adversary. Luckily, his new ability is precisely what we require to solve this conundrum. Instead of simply destroying everything around himself, Shockwave deals much less damage while exerting existential levels of force to our porky foes and electrifying them for good measure. This allows us to fling debris a much greater distance. Here, a certain peculiar launch can lodge my black bird in this house halfway up to tear the roof off. Now I just have to hope that I've happened upon the permutation of these events which will send the roof crashing down with enough force to break the pig's upper pipe and properly disrupt its living situation. Once I manage that, it's basically mission accomplished, if I don't screw up worse than Dr. Pig did by giving me this amazing new weapon. The next 9 levels are pretty straightforward, serving as our introduction to the blue and orange potions which, simply marvelous seasoning for my soon-to-be seared swine. I assume the orange ones are comprised of pure bubbles extract, patent pending, which quickly balloons our enemies upon contact for maximum structure destabilization. The blue ones triple their drinkers while levitating them to the height required for swift and painless death. Usually. Unleashing maximum chaos from these new mechanics will have to wait a little while though, because without Matilda's ability, it's entirely unreachable in the next problematic level. Initially, 27-3 looked intensely intimidating. Some of this challenge's weakest birds with stone everywhere. I had this pinned as potentially impossible, but thankfully I was spared my greatest fears by this singular glass slab which underpins the far staircase tower. Had this been made of stone instead, I likely would have found no recourse, but a perfect launch with blue and a little bit of collapse luck up can wipe out the entire party. At that point, I can just thread the needle with Matilda once or twice to take out the well-protected straggler. 27-6 reveals yet another potion type, but this isn't nearly as friendly an introduction as the last two. Honestly, I might have been stuck here for way longer than half an hour trying the same lame shot over and over to open up the far side of the map if it hadn't been for an extreme fluke. One time after I reloaded the level, the far tower, which was normally out of my reach, simply collapsed from the get-go, triggering the TNT beneath and setting off a chain reaction punctuated by the pink bubble pig. I have no way of knowing how rare this clearly unintended physics interaction is, so it is scarily possible that there's an alternate universe where I spent 10 hours on this level with zero success. Thankfully, that's not the one we live in, and this video's run remains safe for now. But now it's finally time for some ultimate potion shenanigans. 27-13 has all the hallmarks of an impossible level. A small, weak bird lineup, a pig too far to reach with standard slingshot power, and strong stone defenses combined to produce Short Fuse's first hour-long stage. My early attempts targeted the central TNT, but I could never activate it with only a single bird. Any of these pigs can be managed individually. Even the furthest can be popped with some precise bouncing, but actually defeating everyone here seems like it would require truly astronomical luck. Creating a single balloon pig and hoping it fizzles out in the correct direction isn't going to cut it. So, what if I could have more than one? By hitting the very top of this stone triangle at the perfect angle to bounce up and punt the potion into the far tower, the fumes can waft through the wall and triple the porker who would normally be subject to balloon expansion. When the orange potion triggers during this event, 3 turbulent bower bubbles will zip around the stage wreaking absolute havoc. Now, crucially, this is not a guaranteed victory. The furthest porker is likely to remain a menace even after all this chaos, and any number of the others might have failed to embrace the sweet release of death. After switching up my strategy to hit the potion from the top, some proper inflations utterly annihilated every pig in the center of the map while weakening the furthest structure. Bouncing upward on the corner sent blue shattering through the weakened window, and after breaking the final potion, that mutated triple pig never stood a chance. At first, 27-15 threw me for a loop. An early attempt confirmed it was possible after my 2 shockwaves managed to execute every enemy save for the lowest of the low, but its long distance and awkward position proved even Terrence with double chuck backup insufficient for cleanup duty. No matter what I tried, this guy stubbornly remained alive. It was only after I changed my perspective and began targeting this orange potion, which I'd viewed as purely decorative, that things began to turn around, so I'll just let this lucky shockwave speak for itself. Yeah, that was epic. Full disclosure, I cannot top that. The entire video is downhill from here, unless you're only watching for my pain, because that gets way worse. 28-2 is yet another stage with out-of-reach enemies, because these ceiling pipes are extraordinarily tough. Still, I didn't have much choice other than to repeatedly throw my birds at them for 40 minutes and hope things worked out down below. Eventually, Chuck broke the corner piece, leading to the wooden support sliding out of place to send these rusty pipes falling down the other side. A gas canister shot through the lower left minions, while the far pig fell victim to this precariously placed potion. 28-5 is a total pushover, as in I really need to push over this far tower because Chuck can't reach it. Obviously this is possible since I have Shockwave on my side, but the key is actually launching debris into the right location to destabilize this structure. When a couple key impacts flipped this one wooden block sideways, gravity took over from there. 28-6 was even easier, but it's still worth including because this solution is the closest we're gonna get to a 27-13 sequel. Oh yeah, enjoy those lovely balloons while they last. The fuse on this episode has nearly run out, which is why it closes with a bang. The key to 28-12's completion lies in the explosive gas canisters strewn throughout these train cars, but it took me an hour and a half of attempts to finally figure that out. Early on, this stage seemed impossible, since attacking in the normal fashion would always leave alive this pig in the wooden frame. I couldn't consistently activate any explosives, and attempts to remove the pipes preventing the trains from being pushed off the edge usually resulted in some bizarre magnetism still holding them together. Explosives were the only way I managed to dispatch the best defended porker, and after every other idea fell short, I reasoned they must be my path to victory. This proof of concept was realized when Matilda glanced off the edge of the caboose's rear window, chipping it enough for Chuck Chuck to bounce back off the hill and uncork the lower canister. Hitting the bottom one is unexpectedly crucial because it takes out the basement borer in a way the top just doesn't. Almost as amazing is the way it will fling its identical sibling to the upper level, blasting apart the entire car. Unfortunately, I'm stupid, and I completely squandered this result by attempting to arc my birds for the final fatalities rather than taking the more direct approach. As such, I missed my shots worse than the angry birds missed their eggs, and it took me another 40 minutes to replicate these excellent starting conditions because it turns out that triggering the bottom was an unexpected fluke. Chuck's bounces are much more likely to hit the top, thus trapping the porker to invalidate my attempt. Hitting the corner of the stone slab spiked him into the lower canister, providing me with a shot at redemption. This time I only had Matilda, but my main maiden ain't messing around. A clean shot mashed the last enemies to earn episode completion because levels 14 and 15 feature nothing to fear. Woo! Those were some tough levels. Hopefully we can now take a moment to relax and recharge with some delicious surf and turf. Between his balloons and alcohol, it looks like King Pig is on vacation, which is utterly unacceptable. If he's stealing my unborn children, I'll at least make him work for it. What surprised me is how it felt like I was on vacation too. Regardless of my bird lineup, I swept through these stages like the ocean breeze, with only a few minutes required for even the hardest hams. It was certainly a welcome intro to the episode, but Short Fuse hadn't yet reminded me just how diabolical this game can get. Level 15 was the most difficult, because while my few beautiful birds are plenty to send these towers crumbling, the pure blue sky left me with no reference points for lining up my shot. As such, I just had to eyeball everything, leaving my final Chuck with some embarrassing failures. Abruptly after the initial level set, this changes. At first glance, Surf and Turf 16 looks relatively non-threatening. Most of the level is wood and glass, and none of the pigs look too well protected, but matters will make a mite more sense once you see the projectiles I've got locked and loaded. Yeah, not much to work with, but maybe manageable, right? Well, the posterior pig would beg to differ. Balanced on two connected planks, this tower is incredibly sturdy, at least by Angry Bird standards. Now, you're definitely thinking, Dren, just use one of the blues to blast through his glass window. And don't get me wrong, I would love to do that if the window wasn't 3 pixels out of my reach. I can jiggle the tower slightly, but nothing that approaches the excruciating extinguishment I seek. That means Matilda must take this role upon herself, leaving her bulk unavailable to crush the corporal in his stone-walled room. I continued my attempts for nearly 2 hours without a whiff of the success I sought. My blues could take out 3 or 2 pigs respectively with a perfect shot, depending on whether they were aimed toward the front or back of the level, but never came close to beating the best protected porker. I punched through with a single power use and was getting ready to call this stage my first failure of the video, but in a desperate bid to avoid such a hellish outcome, I continued my attempts for a while longer. By mixing up my strategy to target the nearest weak point first, a lack of glass in the second tower can cause a leftward crumple, which on occasion actually exerts enough leverage to push the corporal from his perch. When I first saw this, it was extremely exciting. Here I had a hypothetical method for disintegrating the final hostile hog, but this helmet ensured that he would not go gently. For all I knew, he'd survive every possible tower collapse, but I only had one option to find out. As I continued attempting this strategy for maximum mammal damage, I encountered quite a few similar results, but perseverance has been the key to victory since I first began this challenge. All I needed was for one interaction to go my way, and after another 20 minutes, I finally found it. The debris from my first flight fell in an arrangement which pushed over the first platform as the tower began tilting, leaving the corporal without a solid landing spot. As the stone cage which had saved his life so many times began to dissolve around him, the raw fear in his little piggy eyes was unmistakable. Towers or not, these stages shall be extinguished. No exceptions. I hope. Moving on from that misery, level 17 is a comparative walk in the park. Crucially, the level lies below me and not above, allowing gravity to work in my favor if I can coax it in the right direction. At first, I thought it was functionally free until I noticed the porkers housed between the pillars. Breaking through the debris down to the bottom right is extremely inconsistent, and most of the time, my last Matilda lacks the necessary mass. So why use Matilda? A proper launch with Chuck can knock him out instantly, and pushing the towers over for cleanup is relatively trivial. Stage 18 denies Hal his boomerang shenanigans, but that loss is felt more strongly in the following level. After 15 minutes of bashing my beaks into this wannabe boat and a variety of close calls, Chuck number 3 was eventually granted the setup necessary to break through to the final foe. 20 looked intimidating, but my blues can clean up whatever bomb leaves standing. 23 is more complicated. Nothing here is individually tough, but once I collapse this construction, it's likely to become a hindrance. I started all my attempts by sending blue through the closest window. Sometimes this could topple everything alone, stone or allow Chuck to do the same, but I always found some way to make a mess of things. Eventually though, the gods of chaos smiled upon me, and my bird's beautiful chain reaction left only one survivor standing. Or sitting. Chuck eats bacon like him for breakfast. 24 hinges on the upper castle's expedient collapse, which when done correctly makes Red our MVP while demoting Matilda and Chuck to cleanup duties. Unfortunately, our heroic powerless pal is left at the back of the line in level 26, and there's only one decent starting shot for blue. I have to thread the needle between the dragon's crest and this stone triangle to hit the only accessible glass panel. Well, I could go for the far tower, but that just makes a mess of things. With that impediment removed, Matilda and Chuck can weaken the structure enough for Red to finish it by snapping the supports. From there, it's smooth sailing for a little while, though 31 has conspicuously arranged its foreground elements in such a way that these tiny bottom feeders are almost completely hidden. Soon we'll be appreciating this quaint indelicacy of level design because 35 smacks me in the face with some nightmarish deja vu. 16 was already bad enough, but at least its untoppable tower was technically within range. Here, it's way further than I can hope to hit, and instead of having multiple supports, it's literally just stuck into the ground. My one hope is that the adjacent structure can nudge it enough for the pig to roll off, an interaction which I originally thought was a complete pipe dream. Despite this, I certainly wasn't going to let this one off the hook without some more intensive investigation. So after completing the stage with one explosive egg as minimalist insurance, I continued my attempts. Surprisingly, hope proceeded without reservation as the far tower's wall collapsed against the sturdy stone spike, wobbling it precisely to force the portly porker to abandon its perch. While this was certainly a welcome relief, it was no guarantee of my eventual success. 2 large pigs remained alive despite me, and the entire strategy hinged on an extremely specific collapse of the foremost fortification. This may have taken only 20 minutes to achieve, but I tried to replicate it for over 2 hours with little success. My furthest foe occasionally suffered the same frightful fate, but this always seemed more the manifestation of sheer dumb luck than my masterful strategy. After literally 3 hours of experiencing this failed result on repeat, I knew I had to switch tactics and find some more consistent way of swaying the far side spiked structure. I began to investigate methods of arcing my first Matilda instead of taking on the nearest tower, which paid off handsomely after... wow, okay, only 6 minutes. That's pretty embarrassing, but also I will take it. Finally, I had a chance to end this level once and for all. Matilda number 2 shattered the roadblock, preventing a clear shot on my final foes, the sturdiest swine in all the land. Come on, Matilda, please. I'm so sorry for every comment I ever made about your weight. You're big boned and you're beautiful that way. You can grow as large as you want. I heard someone unlocked an infinite birdseed glitch. Just do not let me down here. I pulled back the slingshot, aimed carefully, held my breath, and released. Matilda's majestic frame flew through the air, colliding with this cracked stone brick to splinter the wooden block hiding behind. And just like that, it was over. An all-time low score to be proud of. Surf and Turf has not yet turned into sadness and tragedy. 36 isn't free, but compared to that monstrosity, it's much more gentle. The key aspect is these long-range explosives, guarded by a stylish umbrella pig. Every bird I spend pushing over these tiny sheds up top is another that can't be flown toward the lower area, and my soldiers are not particularly impressive. However, if Chuck hits this chunk of glass just right, he can solo the TNT activation, leaving me with nothing else to do than long for a lucky collapse. Level 37 takes a page from 16 and 35, chews it up, and sets it on fire. At this point, you've spent enough time watching me lose my sanity over Angry Birds that you can immediately spot the problem here. Yet again, another impossible pig in the upper right who seems to be controlling this wrecking ball. He's certainly pulling his weight when it comes to wrecking my dreams. However, this wrecking ball would prove to be the most consequential aspect in my quest to conquer this construction. Because of the island's distance from my slingshot, there's no angle which actually hits any of the wooden supports. However, I can swipe this wrecking ball to do absolutely nothing. But if Terrence gets too close, it'll just disintegrate. Matilda's bulk is much more manageable. I figured out fairly early that damaging this dangling MacGuffin on a steep downward angle can pull the roof off this structure, sending the stone bricks atop it crashing down upon the town below. It wasn't much, but this was my only hope and I had to see it through. Occasionally, the pig would be bruised, so maybe some obscure physics interaction would result in this tiny hog's demise. I tried again and again and again and again and again for over an hour, hundreds of shots, hundreds of failures, until finally this happened. I was ecstatic. I'd proven the possibility of complete porker pulverization, and surely finishing the job with Terrence and Chuck couldn't be that hard, right? Right? This was perhaps the most damaging moment to my psyche in the entire history of this challenge, to be granted hope on a whim before it's suddenly ripped away. Such horror can break a man. However, I had no choice but to continue, and after yet another hour of attempts, I got a chance. You have got to be kidding me. Again? Every time the upper pig dies, the lower area collapses in the perfect way to invalidate my other birds. I even tried replicating this shot with an identical mouse placement, but of course that did nothing, because why would you expect the same input to produce the same output in a video game? Okay, calm down, breathe. This is definitely possible. It's just a matter of how many of my brain cells must die first. When I found my final opportunity after over 3 hours of trying, only the far tower was left standing. And for Terrence, that's just another Tuesday. Compared to that pit of despair, 42 was literally nothing, but it still took me an inordinately long time. Stomping this sneaky hog in the bottom right corner requires all of the stones around him to collapse without getting in each other's way, and the scattered TNT is not nearly as consistent or cooperative as I would like. Even when I perfectly detonated everything, this well-positioned porker persisted. After 20 minutes of this, I gave up, but my return quickly saw success as Chuck's TNT activation shook things up, allowing Matilda to destroy the supporting square and blast apart the rest. 43 wasn't too bad, but it did have me concerned at first with this crane blocking the upper area. Thankfully, it's made of wood, so Chuck can splinter it without much trouble. For my final solution, the division of labor was clear. Blues to break the bottom hogs and yellows for the highland stragglers. 44 is weird. Instead of having various objects lodged in the environment, they are now hinged such that if their rope disappears, they'll swing down and block my path. This necessitates taking out the furthest cohort with my first shot, and thankfully the upper island is just high enough to allow a reasonable arc underneath. The rest of these enemies are trickier, especially the baby sitting above the fray, because letting the first stone hinge swing freely does nothing to reach the highest hog, while usually dropping glass to protect the TNT. I wish I had some sophisticated strategy to solve this, but the successful situation was simpler. The glass just fell off instead of blocking my shot, and Chuck happened to fall down the far hole and trigger the other TNT after mopping up the top. Mission accomplished. 45 is a proper half-hour menace in its own right. The most eye-catching aspect is clearly these stone spikes hanging from the sky, and while I did briefly experiment with them, these are nothing but red herrings for our purposes. Instead, their only real function is forcing me to play around them, avoiding a faceplant which would ruffle my feathers. Since a strong arc targeting this TNT is out of the question, Blue needs a slightly weaker shot to hit the explosive box head-on. With some luck, it will trigger during its fall to defeat all the enemies in these two central structures, clearing the path for my second Blue to take out the furthest by exploiting these weak glass supports. Meanwhile, Matilda and Chuck have what it takes to handle the closest. Before I take on the game's ultimate golden egg challenge, it only feels appropriate to try my hand at redemption by revisiting the 4 impossible levels I found in parts 2 and 3. Unlike my Bad Piggies challenges, nobody popped up with video evidence to prove me wrong on these, so I feel fairly confident that those stages remain truly unbeatable without powers. However, maybe they're possible with powers other than the bird variety? That is the name of the series after all, bird powers specifically. A few invested commenters suggested using slingshot upgrades, specifically the King Sling, which seems to double my avian's accessible launching power. Given that every failure so far has been the result of massive levels with out-of-reach enemies, this seems promising, but we will have to sort out some technicalities beforehand. Upon first formalizing this plan, I hoped that the hours I'd wasted working up to short fuse in the mobile version hadn't been for nothing. Now I could use that progress to unlock the other impossible levels, or so I thought, but that would mean playing through the entire game first. After a few more hours of mediocre progress, I realized I didn't have time and reverted to my get out of jail free card, mods. Infinite power-ups and the first level of each episode is unlocked? Sounds dandy. If you're annoyed by this constant switching and consider my run invalid as a result, by all means. Please do it yourself instead. The price I pay is that it only works when the emulator is set to 720p resolution for whatever reason, but that's more than manageable in order to make these villainous levels vanish. I wasted no time in unlocking the offenders, which as a reminder are 16-13 in Mine and Dine, Birthday Party 4-9, 23-11 in Bad Piggies, and Red's Mighty Feathers tutorial. 2 of these fell almost immediately. Birthday Party and Bad Piggies pose next to no threat, because the only issues here arise supplies from distance. When the final tower can't be reached by my bird, I'm out of options, but the King Sling gives me another chance. While I might not be using bird powers, I'd still like for these to be as powerless as possible, so I waited to activate it until after clearing out the rest of the level. The extra elasticity takes some getting used to though. The other two are not so forgiving, and I soon found myself in an experience I was never hoping to revisit. A solid hour consistently clicking reload on mine and Dine's 48th level. I'd previously solved it by using a power before targeting the TNT, opening up some key weak points. Here though, that would require 2 uses of my super sling. I had to switch the roles of my first and second shots. By triggering the top TNT, these boulder bullets will be angled more sharply. If enough smash into these 2 wooden blocks, the tower is sure to topple, clearing the path for my second bird to take out this interconnected monstrosity of a single structure. Unfortunately, even slingshot royalty has its limits. Generally, it's still not possible to hit the very upper area with this upgrade, leaving me to target this wooden corner and cross my fingers for a chain reaction. And yeah, I did start using the scope as well. Sue me. It's not giving the birds any extra damage, and it saves the shred of sanity I still possess for making the same precise shots over and over. Normally, the pig housed in wooden planks at the mountain's peak is the least likely to suffer from my strategy, but when his walls finally tumbled down atop him, I became convinced. Sadly, he was merely left bruised, but on my second time experiencing this collapse, the TNT was generous enough to blast him with a face full of splinters. Pulling that off with only one bird was bad enough, but Red's mighty feathers scared me way more. Previously, I'd spent hours aiming for this sharp, grassy peak to bounce off properly and never found anything which truly elevated my strategy beyond blind luck, so I was pretty surprised when I got my first real chance after only 3 minutes. By glancing off the dirt side, I nicked the glass and bounced back, disrupting the balance and disturbing the pigs to death. Sadly, my next 2 shots squandered this opportunity, getting stuck on the grounded airplane and motorcycle respectively. After defeating 16-13, I returned triumphantly, and also without the shame to prevent me from using the targeting system, though a strange glitch causes that to not persist between attempts here. I destroyed the nearest tower by barely skimming this brown rock and compressing the TNT, then following it up with a lucky bounce into the explosive hole. By some miracle, I'd managed to conquer this level with only 2 birds. At this point, I wasn't taking any chances. After souping up my slingshot strength and scope, Red smashed into the TNT, finishing the episode while foregoing his mighty feathers. Give King Sling some bling, because this piggy bashing machine is making me sing. The quad of impossible levels has been defeated. And now we find ourselves in this finale's final episode, 36 golden eggs to conquer and cement my legacy as the king of powerless angry birds. Originally, I'd planned to look at the unlock process and figure out exactly how many powers each stage would require to both access and complete, but I gave up on this after realizing it would make me depressed. Or more depressed than I already am after those multi-hour surf and turf stages. There are 2 main problems with this. First, 36 golden eggs quickly become very difficult to keep track of, but more importantly, a bunch of them are gated behind 3-starring every level in the game. I already said in the very first part of this series that I would never go for 3 stars while powerless, and I wholeheartedly stand by that assertion for the sake of not delaying this video by 3 years. And my mental health, again. Also, a bunch of in-level eggs definitely require bird powers to reach, and all things considered, this would just be a really lame way to push the power count into double-digit territory while making this video 3 times as long. So let's take a look at the actual levels, which as you might expect are special. Right off the bat, we can snip 16 of these as entirely irrelevant. 11 only feature Red to activate some stage-exclusive gimmick, and the other 5 just aren't levels at all. Fantastic if you want some high-quality sound effects though. Otherwise, let's just tackle the rest of these in order, shall we? The second golden egg presents a pig trampoline park. Obviously possible in principle, but without the ability to triple my projectiles, I'll need perfect fortune in order to take out every pig sitting on the ceiling without my birds being flung out the entrance or slipping in between the bouncy balls. To make matters worse, I can still fail the level while my birds are bouncing around, so I'll need to keep a slingshotter in reserve. One attempt looked particularly promising as my first bird defeated 5 of 7 hogs, but my hopes were quickly dashed as my other 2 were instantly thrown back out the way they came. Success was finally attained through the red rope spazzing out to send blue number 2 like a bullet through the 4 remaining ceiling porkers. 1 down. The next egg also consists of 3 blues surrounded by bouncy balls, but any disturbance in the system will quickly spark chaos to hand me the win. Egg number 9 29 permits me to topple this precarious pyramid, which is easily accomplished by starting a chain reaction from the bottom left, crossing my fingers for maximum deaths with minimum bruises, and exterminating the remaining menaces with Matilda. 10 is a little trickier. It's mostly meant to play itself by triggering these dominoes to disrupt this piggy's perch for a swift execution from the steel ball. Problem is, there's a wooden plank preventing this, which can only be removed by detonating this stack of explosives. While it is possible to bounce red over there with a perfect shot, that can lead to steel sphere smashing before the swine's slow roll into position, or just knock over some stone slabs to block the ball's trajectory. Luckily, this isn't always a guaranteed failure, as my successful attempt showed when the weakened slab soared skyward to make way for my deadly bullet. Good thing there were enough balloons left over this time to slow it down. 19 is not particularly problematic, though it did take longer than you might expect from a stage filled to the brim with bombs. These tiny trotters are trying to wait out the apocalypse at the bottom of this bunker, and debris has a nasty habit of falling down the hole to facilitate their safety. My success still used every bird, but benefited from stones falling greater distances to damage each other upon contact, enabling me to dig through. There are actually quite a few of these specialty levels which greatly benefit from bombs inclusion, but I only touch on 19 here because it took me longer than any of the others. Almost 5 whole minutes. 24 and 29 are similar in the sense that they both provide only a singular chuck. 24 is easy though, because this middle pig with a pickaxe mutation will quickly mine through his brethren to unleash a motherload of TNT. 29 is more complicated because I'm meant to use his speed boost ability to take care of the pigs up top hanging between the vacuums, and without that, Chuck is left to the whims of these powerful suction devices. After he bounced off the far floating island and entered 2 airlifts simultaneously though, he was flung up top to deal the death blow to these well-protected porkers, and the ensuing chaos was plenty to finish the rest of the stage. These golden eggs certainly have seemed golden so far, but all of that is about to change. Stage 31 flips the script. Literally. For some reason, this entire level is upside down. The confusing perspective, which muddles my normally well-honed Angry Bird senses, is the least of my problems though, because once again, I'm faced with a foe who is utterly out of reach. There is no launch angle to dispatch this mad scientist hanging from a rope, leading me to believe early on that it was impossible, and using a single power to reach the minimum score. Then I completely forgot about it for nearly a month, until writing this script reminded me that it required a revisit. When I returned with the knowledge gained from the other 2 episodes, I quickly realized that this was definitely possible in theory due to these orange potions. When RNG from deflationary balloon pigs is on the table, all I needed was for one to bonk the alchemist hard enough that he gives up on life. While obviously inconsistent, this isn't too difficult. I got it to happen in under 10 minutes once I knew what I was aiming for. Unfortunately, that's not the full story, because the rest of the stage is still filled with piggies in every nook and cranny. Skewering the scientist does not guarantee the butchering of every other bower, as I soon found out. I needed not only luck, but a perfect plan to execute whenever I roll a natural 20. First things first, I need to maximize the odds of orange obliteration, which means splattering as many pigs as possible. The triple reproduction potion is usually out of range though, forcing me to target the largest group of tiny troglodytes. Thankfully, this stage has a feature I initially missed, which greatly assists my quest. These 2 hanging bottles start off swinging. By timing the launch of my first chuck right before they begin moving towards each other, I can cut the rope for the orange potion to fall onto this short structure. Actually affecting all 3 requires perfect timing, but was semi-consistent once I got into the swing of things. Triple balloons drastically increase the odds of sending this alchemist to the afterlife. With my key strategy cemented, I just had to find methods for dispatching the rest of these pigs. Hal can take out the furthest corporal when necessary, Shockwave can topple the central stone tower if I don't screw up the shot, and Chuck can purge this precarious pair when a perfect collapse pulverizes the rusty pipe. With all of these strategies combined, it only took me another hour and a half to get this right. Between uncooperative RNG, pixel-perfect pipeline failures, and the remaining confusion from this consistent camera inversion, it still took me a while to get my bearings. I very plausibly could have succeeded more swiftly had I designed my strategy sooner, but I still found an optimal combination. In the end, my win only needed double balloons. This game always keeps me guessing, and nothing exemplifies that more than finding an Angry Birds space test level here in the Golden Egg Gauntlet. The lack of gravity makes it trivial to push the pigs and blocks around, meaning that for once, missing Blue's power actually makes me feel powerless. I know, it's strange. Normally he matters so little I barely notice. Still, with Terrence here to tear things up, it didn't take too long. After weakening the furthest glass bubbles, targeting the TNT with Terrence started a stage-wide chain reaction which stopped these spacefarers in their tracks. 33 worried me when it pulled Red's ability out of nowhere, but with such a generous gift of 7 slingshotable starlings, I had more than enough firepower to damage the dangling dynamite and blast this bower ball out of balance. And now, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, aerial fauna of all shapes and sizes, my defining moment is at hand. We've reached the very last level of this series, which happens to be the longest and most complicated of these aura farming OVA. To ensure we go out on a high note by upping the weird factor even more, Golden Egg 34 gives me 3 bombs to work with. How could this possibly be hard? Well, the short answer is that it's not, but that little gem took me a wicked long while to untangle. Here's the pitch: triple explosives and 8 piglets in bouncy boxes. Sounds pretty easy since auto activations mean I'm not actually missing any abilities, except that these enemies are basically invincible. I saw more success by glitching their boxes into each other than by blowing up in their faces, and in over 2 hours of attempts, the most I managed to murder was 7. I am pretty sure that this level you are looking at is impossible, ripping away my flawless victory in the final moments of this challenge. Or at least it would if this was the real 34th Golden Egg. Lucky for us, this level is an imposter in the best and worst possible ways. Remember how I mentioned at the beginning that I'd gotten a modded PC version with all the levels unlocked? I'd mainly done this for consistency across the final 15 short fuse levels, but it turns out that this egg is also an added extra with a key difference from the standard mobile version. On PC, these purple rubber surfaces are stiff and stay straight, but on a portable device, they're much more flexible. This gave me hope that the impossibility was due solely to my version choice, and that my bombs would prevail when placed in a proper environment. And in perhaps the greatest stroke of luck these games have ever thrown my way, this is a special stage which is technically unlocked from the beginning. By navigating to trophy number 6 in the Mighty League menu, the gold oval is simply waiting to be grabbed. With mobile physics, the level fell in no time. If your definition of no time is 10 minutes and 54 seconds. I'm done. But wait, what is this terrible twist of fate? A secret King Pig level has been sitting under my nose this entire time, and when I select it, I'm presented with something impossible. An Angry Birds roguelike creating random stages full of eggs that I must defeat by lobbing green ham steaks? For a moment, I was petrified, but then I realized something critical. By activating abilities here, I would only be using pig powers. That's totally not against the rules, so on second thought, I'm completely safe here. There's not even a clear win condition when the stage shuffles itself upon every refresh. But as far as I'm concerned, I have hit my win condition. 12 full episodes of Angry Birds beaten with only 4 power uses, all of which can be negated with a single swing from the King Sling. If you're upset about all those pesky missing levels, here's a mostly complete list. Birthday Parties 5, 6, and 7, Flock Favorites, Bird Island, Year of the Goat, Piggy Farm, Jurassic Pork, and then, depending on how you count other versions, maybe some region or platform specific stages or the Mighty League challenges. Like I've said, they basically never end if you keep looking for them, and I have carried this torch far enough. Perhaps there's a spot in a pinned comment for those willing to continue this quest, but only if you've liked and subscribed, of course. A special thanks to all my Alheimer channel members: MacDax, Jzinxo, Blue Blur, Fertilinio, TitanX21, Nathan, Turfy Apple 2, Fernando M. Varela, Daniil Vino, General Rise 8708, Jonas Larson, Darth Vader 31, and JKQ.